Hi everybody, I'm Zilla Blitz and welcome to our first look overview of Burning Banners from Compass Games and designed by Chris Moeller. This is a fantasy-based war game of 2 to 6 players, and as you can see, there is a lot of stuff to look at. We've got heroes, spells, magic, and 6 asymmetrical nations that are all fighting over this beautiful map that lies in front of me. Let's jump in a moment and get started. But before we do, I want to say that this video is sponsored by one of our sponsors, Noble Knight Games. They are a games retailer located in Wisconsin. They ship all over the United States and, more importantly, all over the world. So if you're looking for this game and other games like it, I encourage you to check out their store. The links are down below. I just placed an order for 3 games from them, and as always, I've been extremely happy with their service. The other thing I like about them is that they have used games too, and they're always in either as stated or better condition that they have listed on their site. So I've been very, very happy with their service. And if you do happen to get something through one of the links below, thank you very much, as it does help out the channel. With that being said, let's jump in now and take a look at Burning Banners. Let's do a brief overview of the game as we look at the back of the box here. There are 28 scenarios in this game, and they range again from 2 faction scenarios up to 6 faction scenarios. They can be 1 year of gameplay, which is 3 turns. Each season in the game is a turn, so a 1-year game would consist of 3 seasons. The winter is kind of a dormant year, up to the 12-year Chronicle, which should be 36 turns. And in terms of game length, it says, about roughly an hour, upwards to many more hours to play that 6-player, 12-year Grand Chronicle adventure. It's also important to mention that there's a basic game that consists of fundamental rules of combat and movement and things. And then there's an advanced game that adds in your monsters and heroes and magic spells. And it sounds to me like that advanced game is where the richness of the game really starts to shine, and so much of this content revolves around those heroes and magic spells that I think that's really you're going to want to slide into the advanced game as quickly as you can. We've got 6 asymmetrical sides. We'll talk about those more later. Units are armies and heroes, and there's very light stacking in this game. It's 1 army to a hex. You can also add a hero to a hex, so very light stacking. It should play a very visual treat in order to play this game. We'll dig in and talk more about the complexity in the solitaire rating as we get started, but I think that's our basic overview of gameplay. The game comes with 3 booklets: a rule booklet, a campaign booklet, which has our scenarios in it, and then Traveler's Guide, which contains some of the lore behind the world here. Let's jump in and take a look at each one of these in turn. We'll start with the rule book, which is 60 pages. And you might be saying, oh my, this sounds like a complex game. But if we really kind of carve it down here, we mentioned there's a basic and an advanced game here. The last 15 pages or so, from page 45 on, is a reference guide that references some of the spells and some of the heroes' powers and things like that. So this is really more, I would kind of say, it's more reference information you're going to be looking up if you need to clarify a particular card or spell or hero's function. So I'm going to kind of say these aren't necessarily part of what you're going to need to know as you are learning the game. Then we have the 44 pages that are rest of the rule book here. The first 30 here is the basic game, and I've looked through most of these right now, and this is fairly straightforward. The game is a lot less complex than I imagined it. And as we can see, 40-something pages here, 30 pages in the basic game, but the text is rather large. We have a lot of graphics, really well laid out. Everything that I've read through, I've understood, and it makes a lot of sense. It's pretty clear text, and again, this is relatively straightforward. And even the back chunk here of these rules here, from 24 on all the way up to 30, really is just kind of delineating some of the special functions of each one of the factions, or the kingdoms as they're called here within the game. So the basic rules are 24 pages. And then as we get in, again, the heroes and spells and magic and things like that, that starts on page 32. And the game does get a little bit more complex as we go through that, but it's really only another 12 pages of rules as you go through all of the different ways that magic works and spells work. And it's not an incredibly complicated game. If I were to give this a complexity rating, I think the basic game is a 3 out of 10. And I'm going to put the advanced game at a 4 out of 10 with a clarification there. I don't think, and again, you know, until you play, you're kind of speculating. The rules in and of themselves are very straightforward. I think where the game is going to get its complexity is with the interaction of the hero uniqueness and the interaction of spells and how those all play out and work together. That's generally where I find a game that's got a lot of its information on cards can sometimes get a little bit complex. You got to figure out how each one of them work and how they're going to interact and play and how to use them well. I will say though, I would add to that it looks like this is going to take quite a while to figure out how to play each one of the kingdoms to their greatest advantage, because they are very unique, as we shall see as we look through them. But yeah, I think a 3 out of 10 again on that basic game and 4 out of 10 on the advanced game. Certainly I wouldn't let the complexity of this shake you off, especially you know, as you're going in with that learning lever, really, if you would, level of being able to play the basic game a couple of times first. Now, I mentioned there were 28 scenarios, and this is the campaign book where they are all housed here. It starts with scenario 0, which is your introductory campaign. Where is it? Right? Yeah, this is campaign 0 here. And then we have campaign 1 over here. All really neatly laid out. And again, one of the things I think is worth mentioning here, that even though there are 6 players, a lot of these scenarios, this is a 2-player one, you've only got 2 of the kingdoms in here. But even if you have more, again, they're either going to be invader or resistance. So you can play these as 2-player in that way. And then we go through, they start to vary in terms of how many players you can have. Most of these early ones are 2. We can also see up in here that there are 4 maps in the game that lie behind me. You know, this one only has this northeast and southeast map active. This one only has 1 of the maps active. So I think a lot of these campaigns in the first half of the scenario book are really designed to be played in, you know, 1 night or so. This is 6 turns, so again, 2 years. A lot of these are 3 turns. The later ones here are 6, but here's another 6 turn. Of course, all the ones 5 turns. These earlier ones in here reminded me, they were like a lot of 3-turn ones in here too. 5 turns, 3 turns, here we go, 5 turns there. So there are some shorter ones in here, but certainly playable in an evening. Then we get to what is called the Chronicle here. The Chronicle of the War of Burning Banners. This is a 12-year war, but it's carved up into books and chapters, and you can start with any one of these chapters. So if you wanted to play, like, for example, a 6, you know, start in the middle here, book 1, chapter 4, book 2, chapter 5, you could start here, and then you're going to be playing out the 3 turns here, the 3 turns here, and they go on. And nations and kingdoms can drop out. One of the nations drops out automatically, and then it comes back later. Again, we can see 5 players up in here. And of course, you could play it with 2, you could play it with less in terms of 1 player controlling more than 1 kingdom. But this is the real majestic campaign, if you would, here. We're using all the maps and all the kingdoms and things like that in all its glory. So that is that. At the end, we have a kind of an outline of the abilities and characteristics, and then here we have the designer's notes. I found it really interesting that he mentions Divine Right was the inspiration for this game, and then also that he started with the artwork, then went to the lore, and then went to building up the game. And the goal was to build a fantasy-based war game, and we can see as we'll look at the map with the hexes and counters and stuff like that, that's clearly what the aim of it is here. And then we go to our Traveler's Guide, where some of the lore is spelled out. And again, the game is peppered with really just kind of majestic artwork here, kind of scattered throughout. But this gives a little bit of the history and some of the magic and some of the nations here, rulers, heroes, and villains. So just filling in kind of the backstory to the game. So a really nice set of documents here. Before we jump in and take a look at the player aids and the counters, I did want to highlight some of the art. These are kind of hero cards that come with the game. They seem more for flavor than for anything else, but we could just kind of get an idea for some of the artwork that permeates the game. Just a really nice touch. And again, we can see some of the orcs. We've got Oathborn here. We'll talk about these. Army of the Night are the Vampire Kingdom. And this is kind of our Nordic Fjordland. Again, Army of the Night, and then Goblins coming in here. So really nice touch to have these in the game. I'd like to take a look at the 6 kingdoms that are in the game via these playmats. There's 1 for each of the kingdoms. We're looking at Fjordland and Oathborn here. And these are recessed. They're really nice quality here. Recessed because you're going to be storing your counters here, and it's a gold-based unit deployment system. So at the beginning of a scenario, you're going to get a certain amount of gold that you purchase units, and you build out your army that way and then deploy them to the map. And so as units get eliminated, you bring them back here. You can kind of bring them back into the game with gold and really kind of create kind of a custom or unique feel to your army each time you play. Now, I want to highlight a little bit some of the features of the Six Kingdoms because it feels like a really cool feature behind the game. This is a Fjordland, and we can see they've got kind of that Nordic feel to them. Now, they're a rugged terrain land, and they're cash poor, but they have fantastic sea movement. The Oathborn are your dwarves. They're scattered about, and they're slow, but very, very powerful on defense. Now we come to our two Shaska kingdoms, which are the orcs and the goblins. Now both of these play very, very interestingly because they don't have income generation. The way they get income is by looting and laying waste to other nations and to other cities and towns. So in order for to succeed as them, you have to play very, very aggressively. Our last two kingdoms, the Army of the Night, are the vampires. They have covens that they can generate and spawn rat swarms, and that's where they generate their income from. And then we have the Eastern Empire, which is kind of this empire that's falling apart, and they're trying to hold on to power. They're an economic powerhouse, but they have revolts that help keep them in check. So kind of, again, all of these, as you can see, have kind of unique elements to them that I think is going to make playing the game well a whole difference from playing the game. You're going to have to figure out how to use your strengths and compensate for your weaknesses of each one of the kingdoms. Now we come to a fun part here. Let's take a look at our counters. There are 7 counter sheets, about 450 counters in all, about 50% of which are these 1-inch pre-rounded counters representing the various units that are in the game. Now these are all double-sided. Some of the units are fragile. They only have one side to them. But we can see here, these here ones that are marked with this edge here are fragile units. One thing we can see too though is, we've got 6 times 4, 24, and then 6 heroes here for the Eastern Empire, which sits in the top half. So this is not a counter-dense game. I mean, you're really going to be playing with, I think, a reasonable amount of counters per side. Now, if you're playing one of the 6 kingdom scenarios as 2 players, yeah, you're going to have a lot more counters with you. But if you're, playing some of the two kingdom games, it's really going to, I think, play relatively smoothly. And the other factor, we mentioned that stacking is only one counter per, well, 1 army per hex. You can also bring a hero into it as well in the advanced game. I think it's going to be a game that parses very visually as you're playing too. We can see down here we've got the Fjordland units for the Nordic side here. Let me come in here. Oathborn. And let's, at this point in time too, let's take a little bit of a look at one of these units to talk a little bit about how combat works. So if we see the Iron Legion here by the dwarves, in that top left corner we can see a 4. That's the gold cost for the unit. And the way combat works is kind of highlighted by these 2 black bars and the white bar on the right hand side. That indicates the number of dice the unit gets in combat. So it's kind of a dice chucking mechanic for a game. The black bars indicate 1 8-sided die, and the white bar indicates a 6-sided die. Now there's die roll modifiers and things like that. There are ways you're going to get more dice and less dice and all these kinds of things. So it's much more nuanced than just add up your counters and throw them against each other. There's a lot of other things going on with terrain and things like that too. But the basic combat system is you're going to be rolling the number of dice that you get, and on a 5 or greater you hit. So on an 8-sided die, you've got, at even odds, you've got a 50% chance, and then on a white-sided die, you've got a 1/3 chance to hit. And then if you hit more than the other side, you inflict damage on them. If they hit more than you, they inflict damage on you, and draws are kind of no damage. They're just ties and drawn and things like that. So we really can see kind of, it's not, again, a complicated, math-heavy combat system where you're going to be calculating odds. It's really going to play fast, and yet at the same time highlighting some of the uniqueness of these units here. Now, as we shift over and we can kind of see the Army of the Night counters here, and then the orcs and things like that. Especially if we look at the Army of the Night, we can see some white circles with kind of icons in them, and those give units unique characteristics. So it's not just as simple as 2 units and their basic die roll modifiers. We have ranged units. We have units that are huge, that have special rules that play with them. Feral units and fragile units. These here that have the gray-sided ones mean that they can only take 1 hit instead of 2. So there's a lot of other things going on, and that's not even all of them. There's other factors in here too that can impact how a unit plays in combat. So some rather unique characteristics that are identified here. Here's flying units as well by some of the elements that are on play here. Here's our goblins. We got the orcs on the left-hand side. Really beautiful counter set. And that takes us through our 6 kingdoms. Then we get in here to, these are the monsters I mentioned. So if we look at these, each one of these is unique and they are in lairs. And if you attack a lair, you can trigger one of these and your opponent controls it. Then if you beat it, there are rewards to it as well. And we have some sea monsters down here as well. Kingdoms, by the way, can collapse under certain conditions. You can kind of have a kingdom fall out of the game. So just a lot of fun stuff, I think, going on. And then the last 2 here are 5/8 of an inch counters. And these are used for controlling. Again, we talked about how it's a gold-based game. And so you're going to be capturing cities and settlements. And then you can put a control marker on those. You're limited by the ones that you've got in your entire set here. And those counters, they're going to be places where you can build units and then you're going to be getting gold from. So you're going to be kind of constantly this struggle to try to manipulate and manage your income as you're moving forward and kind of raising cities and knocking empires out and trying to have combat. And here's our raised features right now. You have an option as you go in, instead of taking control of a settlement or a city, you can raise it to the ground. And then because we've got gold, here is our gold-based income down here, the kind of coins that you'd be using. And that is our set of 7 counters in Burning Banners. We've got player aids. We've got some more player aids to look at before we start to look at our cards. There are 2 identical player aids here. Front side, again, is for combat resolution. There is an ambush and a strike feature so that are there in the game that has a variety on combat. Some units have a stealth feature, and that stealth feature allows them to have an ambush, in which case you're striking first. These talk about the different locations in the game. We have the turn sequence and the relatively few number of actions that you're going to be taking as a unit here. Pass, perform a ship movement, recover, work a mine, command a monster kind of thing, attack, and then we have a certain number of free actions like place a control marker, place a raised marker, and then this is that winter turn that allows some regeneration as well. Ships and sea movement too going on in the game, and then we have our terrain effects chart here on the other side, which highlights a lot of the different impacts of terrain on the game. Here's what's called the season display, basically your turn record track. So we can see tracking seasons up here. Each year has 3 turns, spring, summer, and autumn, and then the winter is kind of a regeneration phase. This is where you're putting your markers for your kingdoms as they're kind of going through their turns. We've got our income track over here, and then the revolt track for the Eastern Empire, which is their unique kind of mechanism that holds them in check. It's a really thick, heavy card, nice quality. We'll take a look at spells pretty soon here, but this is basically the card display that helps you manage spells or discard pile and things like that. And then treasure deck as well. There is treasures again when you capture those lairs and things like that. So lots of things to fight for and go through. Again, a real kind of a wonderful job in terms of the fantasy element behind this game. Let's jump in now and take a look at some of our cards. There are over 200 playing cards in the game. They're really nice vinyl quality here, so I feel like they're going to be very, very durable. And there's a variety of types here, but about 3/4, I'm going to say about 75% of these cards are either spell cards or blessing cards. And they're both basic magic. They're both basically magic spells, but the game distinguishes between spells and blessings. Spells are generic magic spells that are available to any of the kingdoms, while blessings are the magic spells that are unique to those kingdoms. So we're looking here at the Army of the Night, some of their spells, and there's more off here. There's quite a good collection of them for each one of the nations here, and some of these for the Fjordlanders here. So we've got Call of the Wild, Water Elemental, because you recall when we talked about the Fjordlanders, sea movement is their strength here. Warrior of the North, Gain a Hero, Powerful and Eternal, Enslave for the Army of the Night. So, I mean, just a lot of different ways that these cards are going to be playing in here. And then there is a phase in the game which is called the Arcane Study phase, where you kind of emphasize different cards, different spells or blessings or treasures to try to bring into your game plan hand. Now I've switched out some of the cards here to our generic spell cards, and these again are available to any one of the kingdoms. So Mage Arrows, Earthquake, Tsunami, Dust Devil, Lightning Bolt, etc. This is probably a good time to talk a little bit about the Solitaire rating. I would give this Solitaire an estimate here of a 5.5 out of 10. Now there's no Solitaire engine or Solitaire bot that's going to allow you, or any of the scenarios are delineated in any way as Solitaire special scenarios. This is really a game where if you're going to be playing it 2-player, you're going to be playing both sides. And this in particular, with the cards and the spells and the blessings and things like that, this is the one area where you've got a little bit of hidden information, right? Because your opponent's not going to be able to know what's coming, but if you're playing both sides, you're playing both sides. Solo, you're going to have a good idea of what you're going to know, of course, what each side is holding for cards and stuff like that. So that's the one place I would probably bring down the solitaire rating from a very solo-friendly 6 to a solo playable, certainly solo playable 5.5. But I think this would be really easy to work around in the game. Here are some of the unique blessings now for the Oathborn, which are the dwarves and the goblins over here on the side here. Again, runestones, mountain folk, as we might have guessed, strong heart, and elements like this. And this is one place too, I mentioned earlier, I think this is probably in that advanced game. You know, it's going to ramp up the complexity a little bit. I've always found that as you add cards in here, cards in essence are special rules, and that's going to require kind of parsing the card and figuring out how it goes into gameplay. And I can't speak yet, of course, not having played, to how well this integrates into gameplay. Sometimes you get like rule conflicts with these things, and it can take a little while to sort those out. But really love the variety and the style and the writing and kind of the thematic element to all of these different spells and blessings. And I'm going to guess there's about 150 of these in the game. Whoops, one thing I forgot to mention, in that 150, we also have the treasures, and here's 8 examples of these treasure cards. And again, there are a variety of ways to get these in the game, but Philosopher's Stone, Ring of the Morai, Kadan's Feathered Cloak, Caster and Stacked Army gain Flying and Feral. So really things I think are going to kind of change the game in a lot of fun ways. I could see some of these treasures kind of swinging a kingdom's fortune in a completely different way. If you get the right hero and the right army with the right treasure, that could really change the fortunes of your kingdom. So I think the ability for this game to kind of tell story as you're playing and spawn narrative along those fantasy elements, all embedded into a war game type environment, it feels... It's the kind of game that you look at, you just can't wait to play it, right? This feels really cool. Now the remaining 50 or so cards, we have hero cards. Each kingdom seems to have about a half dozen, give or take 1 or 2 here, of their own unique heroes. We can see some goblin heroes here, so Living Siege Engine, the Man Strangler, Weasel Eyes, Cull the Weak, and they each have their own unique characteristics. We've got some Fjordland heroes in here, Thor Jotunsson, the Eva Eriksdotter, Vasta Pelos. This here is the Eastern Empire, a couple of heroes here. Lilith, Queen of the Night, the Immortal Sorceress, so +2 Enslave. Again, each one of these carrying their own unique characteristics with the idea you get the right hero, you get the right treasure, you get the right army, who knows what kind of strength combinations you can build up into the game. And again, we've got the 6 factions, looks like about 6 or so for each one, so I'm going to guess about a little bit more, between 30 and 40 of these hero cards that come into play. The last 2 types of cards to look at, we have some quick start cards. So I mentioned how at the beginning of a scenario you can you get gold and then you decide and determine your army outlay based on how you're going to spend that gold. These are quick start cards that give you a starting setup rather than giving you the option to play with gold. So these I'd probably guess would be good things to do as you're starting out to learn the game when you don't really know what you should be buying or how you should construct an army. This will probably get you started along that path. And then on the left-hand side, each one of the kingdoms has their own kind of kingdom information card that as the player you're going to want to hold that talks about the unique characteristics of your particular kingdom. Before we jump in and take a look at the map, I would be remiss to not mention that it doesn't come with a bucket load of dice. So we get 12 6-sided dice and 8 8-sided dice here. And last, but certainly not least, I give to you our map. Now this is all mounted, really nice quality mounted maps. There are 4 sections here. All together we've got a 34-inch wide footprint and then a 44-inch on the top. However, I will mention that in those, we talked at the scenario book how you've got that Chronicle, which is that potentially 12-year campaign you can play that could be played as long as 1 to 12 years. That's where you use all 4 maps together. And those scenarios in the front half of the campaign book generally include 1 or 2 player maps. So really it's, you've got a lot of options for smaller footprints here too. If I were to make a video about best wargame maps, right? This is going in it. I don't know where it would place, but it is by far one of the best wargame maps I've seen. I mean, the artwork on this is just absolutely incredible. As I was kind of getting ready to make this video, I was taking some pictures of close-ups and things like that that I'm showing as I'm talking here, and I just was staring at it for like a half an hour. I mean, just so evocative of story and narrative as we look at these things, like Shark's Reef, the Bright Sisters, Dagger Island, Peril Strait, Hangman's Harbor. I mean, just really cool names. Tower of Crows, the Seven Mothers down here, the Giant's Staircase. It's just such Justice Bay. You know, we get some dark things, the Storm Spine up there, and it's all just loaded with this artwork that just brings everything to life. And we can see as we're looking at it too, you know, we've got the kingdom designations as to where these starting nations can start and things like that too. And one of the things I wonder too as I look at this, you know, is just, you know, you've got the 28 scenarios in the game, but you've got beginning, you know, money, gold amounts and things like that. It seems like you could almost just kind of very quickly and easily spawn and generate your own scenarios in this, but just a fabulous map. I love the color palette that's here, just the soft blues for the ocean, the greens, and this kind of a grayish element that really just fits in with all the theme and lets all of the artwork just kind of pop as you're looking at the map here. So just a fantastic job with this. And I know, again, the designer mentioned he started with the artwork, which to me really shows with something like this. And then, you know, building out the cards and the heroes and the spells and stuff, this just really looks like a treat. I've looked at a lot of games with first look videos, and, you know, again, I've not played this. I just, you know, just gotten it. I'm just unpacking it now and kind of going through the rules and things like that. And generally, most games that I look at when they're new and shiny and stuff like that, it's like I get pretty excited to play them. Some games just grab you, and it's like almost like you can't not play it. I think that of all the games I've looked at in the 3 years now that I've been doing wargaming videos, this game has the highest kind of magnetism to it. Like when I look at this, I just want to play it. It's just, I hadn't heard about this game until just a few months ago when I think I was looking on Compass Game Site for one of the upcoming Wargame videos, and I just stumbled onto it. And then I saw a video on it that someone had kind of an earlier copy of it or something like that. I'm like, oh my God, I have to get this game. And so here it is, and I just couldn't be more excited about this. This really seems like it's a tour de force with, you can tell with all the time they put into the artwork and things like that. Anyway, I'm blabbering. I love the map. It's absolutely fantastic. I hope you like it too. And there you have it, everybody. We've looked at everything inside the box with Burning Banners from Christopher Moeller and Compass Games. Just really a spectacular production. If it plays anywhere close to how good as it looks, I think this is a real keeper. I'll put a link here. This is actually the first fantasy war game that I've gotten, so I don't have much else to compare this one to. I will put a link here, however, to our Agincourt playthrough with GMT's Men of Iron, which does kind of evoke all of this type of feel of combat, except without the magic and spells, of course. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a great day.